There also is less toys, I feel like here, so maybe it might be a little nicer to visit. Did you guys go out to dinner last night? Did you guys go out to dinner last night? Yeah.
My family moved to the area in the Idaho Territory in 1887 and started farming using the same some of the same spring waters that we use now. And so the family's been there utilizing that natural resource for a long time. And then in the late 60s, we started actually raising rainbow trout. And then in the 80s, we transitioned and started raising sturgeon also. Because my father remembered eating sturgeon when he was a young boy there was still a commercial fishery at that time, and they would bring the sturgeon around, and he said, I want to share that experience with others. So as soon as we could and broodstock were available, we started spawning or started raising white sturgeon.
What does that mean? You guys have 10 farms. What does that look like?
Actually, they're spread over about 45 miles of the Magic Valley in southern Idaho. And so we have a really robust aquifer in that area that's fed by snow melt off the Rocky Mountains, and it comes down into this valley. And we have farms where those springs come out of the ground and into the canyon. So that's why we're so spread out in our farms, but we make use of that natural resource of that clear spring water to raise our fish, and it produces an excellent tasting caviar, very clean tasting egg.
Just how clean is it when it comes in and out? I remember Linda talked about that in Phoenix.
Yeah, the spring water that is entering the ponds is drinking water quality. Some of the spring water that's available comes to our house, unfiltered, unchlorinated. It's that clean. When it leaves the ponds, it's cleaner than what EPA designates for the receiving stream. So it's very minimal. We have really high standards for solids and dissolved phosphorus. So we remove the solids before it leaves. That reduces the phosphorus. The feeds are designed to be low phosphorus. We don't overfeed. We control the feeding so that we're not putting out the excess nutrients. The fact that we reduced, as an industry, we reduced our phosphorus needs by 40%, manipulating the diets, and work closely with the local universities, constantly looking for new feed ingredients that will optimize that. So that becomes sustainable. On our farms in particular, we compost all that waste that we would take out. It's composted, spread out onto the ground, onto pastures, and then we raise some cattle. So we are recycling that, and even the waste from our processing facility gets composted and recycled. So that's also sustainable. And then with these springs that come out, because they're constant flow and some at different heights than others, Gary's dad always wanted to build a hydroelectric plant. So they chose a particular farm, and Gary drove all over the country finding the parts for this. So we now have a 1.5 megawatt hydroelectric plant that can generate enough electricity for a small town. It could power the town that we live in, so that's sold back. So we're always recycling, reusing the water sources. Well, the sturgeon are bottom feeders. They're adapted to use their mouth like a vacuum, and they can vacuum up the worms and the crustaceans and little bugs and crush those in their mouth. So we've had to optimize the diet to sink down to their level with all the nutrients. And because if it's floating, a trout's going to swim by and take that food. They're very good predators. The sturgeon aren't. Where California might have an adult ready for caviar by 7 years of age, ours may cycle the first time at 8 years. Occasionally we find one like that. Most of them are 10 to 12 years old before the female puts on her first cycle of eggs, and then it's every 2 years. If you miss her, it's 2 more years before she will cycle again. Most of our fish are 15, 16 years old when we make the caviar.
Well, first of all, we use an ultrasound to separate the females that have the larger eggs and that we feel are ready to come in. And then we bring those to our farm. Since we have 10 farms, we bring those to the farm with a processing plant in the caviar room and stage them there, and then we'll harvest them throughout the season as we need fish for the caviar room. So
well, the caviar is very clean tasting because of the spring water, because of the pond system we have that doesn't have mud. So they don't taste like mud, they don't taste like algae. Sturgeon and all fish will taste like the environment they're raised in. So if you do raise them in a muddy pond, and they love to be in mud because it's the natural tendency to dig down and find the worms and bugs in the ground. If you raise them in that, they will taste like that. If you raise them in clean water, they will taste clean. So when we put the salt on, and that's all you're allowed to do to make caviar in the US, is use salt, not borax, then they taste clean. And that allows those buttery, nutty notes to develop and aren't covered or masked by that environmental taste. So that's what makes the Idaho white sturgeon caviar different. And then we see colors. We don't know what controls the colors. We haven't figured out genetically what determines color. But we have a range of colors. These two here are a little unusual for us. We don't often see this darker colored, what I call the California white sturgeon caviar color. We often see olives, more, and some browns, and a lot of stripes or rings, white eyes, a spot at the end. And I think that makes ours a little more unique when we get those colors compared to some other caviars. Our sizes, we have chosen to harvest at 3 millimeter bead or larger. 3.4 is usually the largest size bead we will see. But the older the fish, the bigger the body, the more room there is for caviar, and the larger those eggs will grow. Yeah, has a nice individual bead. I like it. Okay, so what you want to do when you first eat caviar is you want to roll it on your tongue against the roof of your mouth to see if you can feel those individual beads. You don't want little groups of grapes. And then you gently press against the roof of your mouth to see if it will pop. And the closer you get that fish to, that you harvest the fish to her natural spawn, the more delicate and flavorful that bead can be. But I tell you, it's really hard to choose that window, because up to 30 days or so before she's ready to say, I didn't get my environmental cues, I'm not gonna spawn, I'm just gonna reabsorb those eggs, and 2 years later I'll see you then. So in that 30-day period, we may think that that egg is nice and firm and has a nice pop, but as soon as you put the salt on it, it gets soft. So I ask people, what is the flavor of the butter? Does it seem like it's a clarified butter or a creamery butter? If it's a clarified butter, it's a little closer to that ideal spawning time. If it's a clarified butter, it was a little less mature. But either one is good. Everybody wants that classic pop. I think you're going for flavor.